Good afternoon and welcome to today's telepress conference. My name is Mike Shriberg. I'm the Great Lakes Regional Executive Director for the National Wildlife Federation, and I will serve as your moderator today. Today's group of speakers will discuss the many ways that Line 5 is a direct threat to our Great Lakes, our economy, and our way of life. We need to look no further than Southwest Michigan to see the effects that an oil spill would have. July marked the 10-year anniversary of the Enbridge oil spill in the Kalamazoo River. This anniversary is a significant reminder of what could and might lie ahead for Michigan communities, environment, and economy if we do not proceed with removing Line 5 immediately. Fortunately, Governor Whitmer has the power and legal authority to act immediately and strongly, and that's exactly what we're calling for today. On the line today, we have Rich Bergman, owner of the Round Lake Group, which operates, among other ventures, the Bridge Street Tap Room in Charlevoix and the Boyne City Tap Room. We have Beth Wallace, my colleague at the National Wildlife Federation, who is the Great Lakes Freshwater Campaigns Manager. And we have Brian Newland, the Bay Mills Indian Community Tribal Chairman. After remarks from our speakers, we're going to open the phones to questions from all of you who have graciously joined us on the line today. So I'll now turn it to Rich Bergman to talk about the significant risk Line 5 poses to Michigan's economy. Please go ahead, Rich.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mike. My name is Rich Bergman, Managing Partner of the Round Lake Group, a hospitality establishment up in Northwest Michigan. We're right on the shores of Lake Michigan and Lake Charlevoix. For too long, Michigan has lived with the threat of a catastrophic oil spill from Line 5 pipeline. Business owners are understandably worried about what would happen to our economy, especially our tourism industry, should Line 5 leak or rupture. Tourism supports thousands of local small businesses, families, and workers across this region of the state. Moreover, the Great Lakes are the backbone of our culture, economy, and identity here in Michigan. Should an easily foreseeable and entity preventable spill happen, Northern Michigan's $65 billion tourism economy could be irreparably damaged. Our small businesses are already struggling to get by in the wake of the economic meltdown caused by COVID-19. The last thing our state needs is an ecological disaster that sets our economy back even further, and at the worst possible time. As a business owner, I'm extremely concerned about the risk posed by Line 5, especially after recent reports of the Asian pipeline has suffered 2 significant strikes within weeks of one another. As a citizen, I'm concerned about the impact of the drinking water. Many of us up in Northwest Michigan, along with the whole top of Michigan, get our drinking water directly from the Great Lakes, and a rupture of Line 5 would have a major impact in Northern Michigan. That's why I'm joining the Great Lakes Business Network in its call to revoke the Line 5 easement in order to protect Michigan communities. Myself and other business owners pride ourselves with playing by the rules. Enbridge does not have to play by these rules and frankly seems to be flaunting that fact. All businesses that operate in Michigan must go through a permitting process, and they must apply and maintain licenses. Enbridge doesn't feel they're compelled to do this. All of us in business in Michigan also have to go through rigorous inspections. Enbridge does not. We also are required to provide and maintain financial responsibility and insurance for liability and economic damage. Again, Enbridge is denying responsibility in this area. Not only are they not playing by the rules, they don't think they apply to them. Our Attorney General, Dana Nessel, is passionate about righting this wrong. She has been a leader in this effort, and we thank her for swift and strong efforts to protect our Great Lakes. Governor Gretchen Whitmer must join her by taking immediate action to remove this threat to our water, our economy, and our way of life. It's time to stand up for clean water, our economy, and the people instead of big oil companies with a horrible track record of safety and transparency to this critical issue. Back to you, Mike.
All right, thank you. And again, that was Rich Bergman of the Round Lake Group. Now I'm going to turn it over to Beth Wallace from the National Wildlife Federation.
Help if I unmuted. Thank you, Mike. My name is Beth Wallace, and I'm the Great Lakes Freshwater Campaigns Manager for the National Wildlife Federation. At the National Wildlife Federation, we agree that Line 5 poses a major and urgent threat to Michigan's Great Lakes and economy, and that's why we've been leading the campaign to decommission Line 5 for about 7 to 8 years now. This aging and deteriorating pipeline is a ticking time bomb for the entire Great Lakes. The serious dangers posed by Line 5 pipeline is made even worse when you consider the company entrusted to operate it, Enbridge. Enbridge has shown time and time again it can't be trusted to protect our Great Lakes, our natural resources, and our largest source of fresh drinking water. We just passed the 10-year anniversary for one of the largest inland oil spills in American history, caused by a rupture to Enbridge's pipeline near Marshall, Michigan. It took over 2 years for most of the oil in the Kalamazoo River to be cleaned up, and pockets of oil remain to this day. Just before that anniversary, Enbridge was fined $6.7 million by the EPA for failing to meet safety agreements following that rupture. That was the second fine by the EPA. Enbridge can't be trusted to monitor its pipelines, and their past behavior proves they use spills as a cost of doing business. Almost immediately following the fine from the EPA, another incident surfaced to raise an additional alarm bells for anyone who was concerned about the Great Lakes. In May, Enbridge discovered even more coating issues and exposed metal on Line 5 and started some repair work. Then later in June, while carrying out that repair work, additional damage was discovered just 150 feet away, all of which went undetected, and the cause is from unknown sources. Those events are believed to be linked back to a strike, including the possibility of yet another anchor strike. These incidents and Enbridge's active efforts since to shut Michigan out of oversight and monitoring show again that Enbridge lacks the ability to monitor its own pipelines, to react in a timely fashion to sufficient damage, or that a rupture that they refuse to cooperate with oversight authorities. Imagine a scenario where the pipeline sustained enough damage to cause a leak. How will Enbridge notice? 1 hour, 2 hours? How long? And excuse me. Now think about more than 1 million gallons that is pumping through Line 5 every hour. One misstep by this untrustworthy company and unreliable company could ruin our treasured Great Lakes for a really long time, if not forever. We've already had visual representation of a Line 5 worst case scenario right in front of our eyes with the 2010 rupture. If we continue to allow this 70-year-old pipeline to operate in the Great Lakes, we could very well see history repeat itself again. Governor Whitmer has the authority and has the information she needs to take action, and we urge her to do so. I thank you for listening, and I will now turn it over to Brian Newland to talk about the dangers Line 5 poses to Great Lakes and why this issue matters to the Native American community.
All right, thank you, Beth. Can you guys hear me all right? Yeah?
Yes, Brian, you're coming through clear.
All right, great, thank you. Thanks, Beth. I appreciate your work and your advocacy in the National Wildlife Federation and the work you guys do. My name is Brian Newland. I am the tribal chairperson of the Bay Mills Indian community here in the Eastern UP. We are one of the 12 sovereign tribes located here within the state of Michigan. And I want to talk a little bit about why the Straits of Mackinac and the Great Lakes are important to us, and why Governor Whitmer should take action immediately to eliminate the risks that the Line 5 pipeline poses to our people and to the people of Michigan. The Straits of Mackinac are important to us as Indian people in our culture and our history because we say that that is the place where the earth was reborn. It occurred at that very spot, just a few miles away from where an oil pipeline now runs beneath the largest body of fresh water on earth. In addition, in 1836, our tribes signed a treaty with the United States of America to cede the land that would become the state of Michigan just 1 year later. And in return, we kept the right to harvest fish in the Great Lakes, including near the Straits of Mackinac. And we have hundreds of tribal members who earn their living right now, today in 2020, by catching fish out of the waters of the Great Lakes. And third, being based here in the UP, our economy here is heavily dependent on tourism and recreation in northern Michigan, and that is all centered around the Great Lakes themselves and the beauty that surrounds us up here. So we know the value of this place, and we know what's at stake. Now, Enbridge routinely ignores its obligations to keep the lake safe and to protect the people of Michigan and our public health. For example, you may recall that the Line 5 supports were recently damaged by a presumed anchor strike, and that that damage and the cause of that damage and the timing was withheld from the public for a very long time. Before that was made aware to the public, we were made aware of other damage to the Line 5 pipeline with exposed metal along the pipeline in the same area. Given these facts and Enbridge's history in the state with the Kalamazoo River oil spill and their routine misleading of state officials and the public, we know that Enbridge simply can't be trusted to be taken at its own word and to keep our resources safe. So we know it's clear there's enough red flags to make any public official aware that it's time to act. The current restrictions on the Line 5 pipeline shouldn't be lifted without an independent investigation that's ordered by the state of Michigan and monitored by state and tribal agencies. While Enbridge is actively fighting to undermine the state's oversight authority on the operation of Line 5, they're also begging state agencies to rubber stamp their tunnel project without any transparency, without any meaningful environmental review, and without a review of alternatives or public comment. Line 5 is a danger to our Great Lakes, to Michigan's economy, to our tribal rights, and to the public health. The tunnel would only extend these risks along the entire Line 5 corridor into the future indefinitely. According to experts, an oil spill near the Straits of Mackinac would spread oil from Petoskey to Alpena. It would also have devastating impacts on our tribal people who earn their living on the Great Lakes, and to the people of northern Michigan who depend on the tourism that is based on our natural resources in this area. I know Governor Whitmer has a lot on her plate right now with the COVID-19 pandemic. And her obligation to protect the public health of the people of Michigan extends beyond the pandemic itself and the coronavirus. It extends to everybody who depends on the Great Lakes. This is an issue that can't wait. And we need Governor Whitmer to step up and take action on this before the Line 5 pipeline becomes our next public health disaster. So I want to thank you all for your time today, for having me here, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of our tribal community. And I want to turn it back to Mike. Miigwech.
Thank you. Thank you to Brian and to all of our speakers for joining us today. And thanks to folks who called in. The bottom line from our distinguished panel today is that we're asking Governor Whitmer to use her executive power to shut down this enormous threat to our Great Lakes economy and way of life. She can do that by revoking the easement, which she pledged to do as a candidate, calling anything short of that by former Governor Snyder half measures that were insincere. She has all the evidence and authority that she needs. The question is, does Governor Whitmer have the political will to act? We're asking her to follow through on her commitment to the Great Lakes, our economy, and our way of life. So from here, I want to open it up to questions from the media. And please, you may unmute yourself, provide your name, news outlet, and your question. If you want to direct it to a specific panelist, that's fine. Otherwise, I will make sure it gets directed to the right person. So no particular order, but feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Hey, it's Lester Graham with Michigan Radio. So have you had any contact with the governor or her staff at all about this, and what's been the reaction?
Yeah, let me see. Beth, do you want to handle that? And maybe Brian, if you've got any perspective.
Yeah, we've been in contact with them regularly, checking in, especially given the recent damage that was discovered about a month ago. And our understanding is that they continue to explore opportunities for action through the easement, and whether that's revoking the easement or additional accountability measures, as well as continuing to review the incident that is currently ongoing and still active. So it's still under investigation as to what caused that problem, how much damage there actually was, And the state of Michigan is continuing to monitor that, but also really from what we have heard, there is frustration that Enbridge has refused to comply with some of the requests that the state has made, which has been made public by the governor.
And I guess, Brian, I don't know if you anything to add, particularly from the tribal consultations I know you've been doing.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. And thanks for your question, Lester. Our tribes have not had direct contact with the governor and her office recently on Line 5. We've been involved in the agency processes, both at Eagle and the Public Service Commission. And in fact, Bay Mills Indian community prevailed on a motion to intervene in Enbridge's permit application before the Public Service Commission. But I think it's worth noting that there's, to Mike's last point, there's been a marked shift in the language that agency officials are using to talk about Line 5. Mike cited the governor's campaign promises when she was seeking office, and the language that agency officials are using now has shifted from an aggressive tone to shut down Line 5 and remove the risks to simply, they always use the words now of, let's remove the pipeline from the water, which suggests they're keeping the option open for a tunnel and letting Line 5 stay in operation from end to end, crossing hundreds of waterways in this state. And those of us on this call and who've been engaged in this issue have noted the change in that language and the change in that tone that is coming out of state officials.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Lester. Other questions?
Yeah, hi, this is Andy Belaskowitz with MIBiz in Grand Rapids. What easement violations could the state point to effectively revoke their easement?
If I could, Mike.
Go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, so the ones that we know are ongoing are the support of the pipeline, and every 75 feet it's required to have that support. Enbridge continues to make changes to the pipeline in order to come into compliance from their viewpoint, and that includes the screw anchors. And in fact, the one that was damaged that they discovered in June was a more recent screw anchor. About a year ago it was installed. So that's one layer. Another is the protective coating on the outside of the pipeline that continues to peel away is an issue, and there really hasn't been there hasn't been identified a clear cause to why that coating continues to fail over and over again. And we know from the Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration and the data that they provide that coating issues are one of the leading causes for failure. So this issue alone is one for concern. There's also a question on the curvature of the pipeline and whether it's out of compliance, and that's something the DNR is reviewing. And then the final one that I think is most important and the most relevant in the recent events and how Enbridge acted and cooperated with the state, or lack of cooperation, in fact, is the due care clause. And that clause is there to ensure that they are operating with safety as the utmost importance. And their decision, Enbridge's decision to restart Line 5 almost immediately following the discovery of this most recent damage without understanding cause and frankly, without understanding the damage to the pipeline, really showed that they have not taken this particular clause in the contract seriously.
Yeah, and this is Mike Shriberg. I'd just point out that the governor ordered a review of the easement about a year ago when Enbridge broke off negotiations with her and sued the state. And according to recent reports, covered by some of those on the call today, that easement review is done and sitting on her desk. So you'd have to ask the governor, of course, what the response to that is. And we don't know what's in that report. We do know that it has been completed, at least reportedly the public and on there. And Brian, I know as an attorney too, you might have a perspective on this.
No, thanks, Mike. And Beth hit it on the head with the due care clause. But Andy, I want to go back to your question, because a lot of times this gets framed as a false choice between allowing Enbridge to operate in violation of its easement or granting it an entirely new easement and permit for a tunnel in a different area of the Straits. And we act as though decommissioning of the pipeline is simply off the table. And that's how we frame this debate. But Enbridge has had to modify this pipeline crossing the Straits over and over again, just in an attempt to keep up with the easement and the right-of-way that it's gotten from the state. And it is, for 70 years, it has routinely been in violation of its easement. The tribes have had discussions with the U.S. Department of Justice on federal tribal relations, and the Department of Justice from the United States under the Trump administration has confirmed that Enbridge has been in violation of its easement with the state at times. And so what I would say is we need to stop framing this as a choice between violating the easement or giving Enbridge a new permit and a new easement somewhere else, and start talking about eliminating this threat to the Great Lakes entirely. It's not a binary choice between how are we going to let Enbridge put our Great Lakes at risk.
Ben Thorpe with WCMU. Obviously, there's a lot of ways in which this is not a new call. I know the Attorney General has said that the easement needs to be revoked. And so I guess just to put it explicitly, is the feeling here, and maybe Brian, you can answer this as an attorney, is there a legal reason the governor couldn't just be moving forward with this, or is the feeling that the governor is explicitly stalling this process?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Well, that's a tough question.
Well, I will say that we're not going to answer for the governor's motive. She's got to do that on her own. But
I was going to say that too, Mike. I've learned that in my time in public service, it's usually not productive to question people's motives. But I think it's fair game to, as Mike did, to point out the promises she made and where we're at. And when you run for public office, I run in elections for my job, and you make a commitment or a pledge or a promise to people in exchange for their support, our constituents have every right to hold our feet to the fire and to account for that. And this governor did not pledge to remove the pipeline from the water. She pledged to shut down Line 5. And so, what her motivations are, I'll leave that to you to ask her office.
This is Mike Shriberg. The thing I'd add to that too is the indications both in the public realm and based on the legal process he's playing out is that we're getting to decision time for the governor. And that's part of the impetus for this call. You're hearing a strong pitch from the different communities, conservation community, business community, tribal communities, for her to take the action on the easement. It's coming to decision time for the governor as part of the urgency of this call.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll add just a little bit. When she made that campaign promise, it was right near the time when we had the first anchor strike in 2018. At that time, Enbridge gave all the promises they could to prevent something like that from occurring. And here we are with 2 additional strikes, blowing out of the water the statistic that was developed by Dynamic Risk. And we have clear evidence that their behavior following that incident is not sufficient. And so the evidence continues to mount that this is the direction that has to happen in order to protect the Great Lakes, and it cannot continue to wait while the tunnel discussion continues to play out.
Great, thank you. That got to your question, Ben. Other questions or follow-ups from anyone who's asked is fine as well.
Yeah, it's Shayna Roth with MLive. The Michigan Public Service Commission is going to be meeting on Monday for public comment about one of the sort of permits or applications that Enbridge has put in for the tunnel. What are your guys' thoughts about the tunnel plan? And I guess, do you guys have any comments or thoughts ahead of that Monday meeting?
Yeah, I want to let maybe Rich answer for a minute, because the Great Lakes Business Network just weighed in on their thoughts for the tunnel to the governor. So Rich, maybe you could summarize those.
Yes, thanks, Mike. From a business perspective, and, as we've been working on this now for over 6 years and analyzing and having experts give us, fact-based information, not opinions or conjecture. The tunnel project, in our analysis, is well underfunded for what its true cost would be, number one. Number two, the financial burden it would put on the company to build it is significant. And we believe that there's, a tactic here to continue to operate Line 5 as, the long run that this will take for permitting review, public comments, all those processes, could be 5, 7, out to 10 years. So again, we don't feel the tunnel is a viable solution. Number one. Number two, as Brian mentioned, the condition of the pipeline on land is just as in grave condition as it is underwater, with numerous leaks. And so, just putting a Band-Aid, and it's a big one and a very expensive one, in the water is one of the issues, but the entire Line 5 pipeline structure is a challenge and very concerning to all of us that operate and manage businesses or support communities. So the tunnel is not a silver bullet that's going to solve this problem. It's a tactic, in our opinion, and a lot's being made of it and how long it will take. But if you look at other tunnel projects around the world, the price tag is multiples of what is being reported for this project.
Thanks, Rich. Brian, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I got a lot on this one, but Shana, I think Rich hit the nail on the head. Is the Enbridge Line 5 pipeline from Superior to Sarnia is over 600 miles long, and the Straits crossing, of course, is the place where it presents the greatest risk, but it's not the only risk. This is the only oil pipeline that traverses 3 Great Lakes watersheds. And if you recall back when Rick Snyder was governor and cut those deals in the lame duck session with Enbridge, in one of those agreements, they directed Enbridge to make immediate repairs to other water crossings, and one of the ones that was identified was just west of the Mackinac Straits at the river mouth of the Aushane River, which is 10 or 15 miles west of St. Ignace. And up until that agreement, nobody in the public was even aware that river crossing was of concern. And the Kalamazoo River spill happened in a small tributary of the Kalamazoo River, and it mushroomed from there and had devastating impacts. And so the tunnel itself would reduce the risk from the current configuration in the straits themselves. But it will prolong the operation of the Line 5 pipeline. And this pipeline crosses hundreds of streams, rivers, and wetlands in the state of Michigan. And there's no telling which one of those are also a ticking time bomb. But if Enbridge is going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in this tunnel, and the state is going to be on the hook for owning that project now, the likelihood of shutting down the pipeline after the tunnel is built, it diminishes greatly, and the risks will remain from end to end over hundreds of miles in this state.
Thank you, Brian. Okay.
Can I follow up with just one other thing?
Go ahead.
I just spoke to Enbridge about their completion of their link under the St. Clair River, which is part of the Line 5 length too. And they're basically saying that 2017 agreement with the state of Michigan is what they're following now that they've finished that St. Clair new line under the St. Clair River. They're going full speed ahead for the tunnel project next. You keep talking about it's decision time for the governor. Is that part of the reason it's decision time now? I'm trying to get a little more context about your thinking about this and why you're doing this news conference now.
Yeah, maybe I'll turn that one to Beth to start with.
Yeah, and just so folks know, the crossing at the St. Clair River is a much different project than what is being proposed in the Straits of Mackinac. It does not require any type of tunneling to the extent that we would be seeing in the Straits. It's a typical horizontal directional drill, which the industry does quite frequently, and it's much more, it's less invasive than what we're considering at the Straits. And to answer your question about decision time, I'd say that we're at this juncture where we have an immediate urgent threat happening that is ongoing, and it's really not clear when additional strikes can happen, and there's no real way to monitor that, especially in the season where there's ice on the lake for significant periods of time. And then we also have a permitting process that's moving forward that's going to experience incredible delays. In fact, Enbridge is the first one at bat to create delays because they're trying to get the Public Service Commission to rule in their favor that a permit is not needed when in fact they know that it will be. So this is just going to create additional delays. And Brian is correct. We're facing 5, 7, closer to 10 years before this project the tunnel proposal will actually be approved, if it is ever approved. And then Eagle just recently said that construction of the pipeline could take 5 to 7 years. And so we're looking close to a decade before we even could see an alternative, light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. And we have an urgent matter at hand, and that's why it's decision time for the governor.
Yeah, and the other piece, this is Mike Shriberg, is that it's, the way it's playing out in the courts, Dana Nessel is battling Enbridge on public trust issues. The governor has kept silent on that, which has actually weakened the attorney general's case. So the governor owns this issue, and the way that she can actually enact it is by revoking the easement and following through on her promise. She cannot continue to just sit back because the issue is going to play out without her in that way.
And Lester, on your question, if you go back just with, this pipeline's been in existence for 7 decades. And if you go back just in the last 2+ years, we've had the anchor strike that severed the power cable across the straits. That actually dented the Line 5 pipeline. We had Enbridge just this last winter leave tools and other debris laying on the lake bed with its pipeline beneath the ice, which it's worth noting, they said they couldn't do anything about that due to the ice cover, but they can apparently clean up an oil spill under the ice. Then this past spring, we had the coating issue and then the screw anchor that came dislodged from the pipeline itself. And that's just within the last 2 years. And Enbridge has refused to answer Senator Peters' questions, the tribe's questions, the public's questions about how many times these types of incidents have happened. But if this has just happened in the last 2 years, I think it highlights that the risk is increasing. If you were driving your car down the road and all of a sudden warning lights started coming on your dash and it was making funny sounds, that would tell you that, you got to get your car fixed soon or something bad's going to happen. And that's what's happening just in this short time period with the Straits crossing. I think the facts of the last few years since we've been watching closely make it apparent that there's a higher risk here than the public ever thought before. And we're only aware of it because we've been looking at it. And I live up here and I cross that bridge often going back and forth. And that area of the lakes is covered by ice for a third of the year. And if something like this were to happen beneath the ice, we would have to wait until April or May to even start a cleanup process. And so it is decision time because we know the risks of that stretch of pipeline are ongoing every day.
Thank you. Other questions or follow-up?
Hi, I have a question. This is Stephanie with the Scenic News and Mackinac Island Town Crier. Part of what I do for work is I cover the Historic District Commission and the Planning Commission on Mackinac Island. And I'm not sure if you've heard about, there was a proposal for Enbridge to install a camera on top of one of the hotels in downtown Mackinac Island as part of their effort to monitor ships more closely, especially during the winter for anchor drags and things like that. So, and from what Bob Leto said, it's part of, they're going to install like 6 of these cameras on east and west of the bridge. And so I guess I wondered if you guys had heard about that, and just kind of building on what Brian just talked about with the winter. I live here too, so I resonate with that personally. Do you have any thoughts on that project, or have you heard about it? Do you think cameras are a solution? They also talked about the temporary nature. They're still contending that the tunnel will be built by 2024, which sounds like it's just not feasible from your perspective. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I'm going to maybe take moderator's privilege and just try and answer this one quickly, because I'm not sure if others know, but I've not heard about that specific proposal. But every proposal that Enbridge has made What it would actually do is identify which ships damaged the pipeline. It would not prevent that damage. So that would be, is it good to have cameras so that you can, after the fact, come after the ship that damaged it with an anchor? Sure, but that does nothing to actually protect the lakes, right? So we would know if we had a catastrophe on our hands, we would have a better chance of knowing who did it. But, as an advocate for the lakes and for our economy, I think those measures are pretty much worthless. So, sorry, I had a strong opinion on that one. So,
oh, that's good, because that's exactly the opposite of what Bob Lato said at the meeting. He said that because it's 7 miles away from the line or whatever, right, they'd be able to communicate with the ship's captains to tell them to pull an anchor up. So,
yeah, that just doesn't seem even slightly feasible to me. I'm not sure. Beth might have a
if I could weigh in, yeah. So it's important to remember that after 2018, they had a laundry list of things to be doing to try to prevent this from happening ever again that clearly didn't work. So that's one piece to keep in mind. And the other is, if there's going to be multiple scenarios that, in fact, many have spoken out on, including Chris Shepler, where you're going to be in emergency situations and you have to put an anchor down. It's a matter of safety for the vessel or the people on board. And so those types of measures only go so far. And I think since 2018, it's proven that we can't continue to take these half measures as a solution to a pipeline that is in an inappropriate location and exposed to risk on an ongoing basis that can't be controlled or mitigated if an incident occurs, like Mike said. And then just to add a finer point to this, even if you were to identify the vessel that caused harm or damage, I think that's a huge problem for the state of Michigan, because that vessel or that whomever may have caused the damage, they will not have the resources to deal with the situation at hand. And Enbridge has refused to date to update the agreement made with the state of Michigan to assure that they have the resources to deal with the damages from a spill. And so we're caught in this situation where we could have a vessel that goes bankrupt and the taxpayers are potentially on the hook for a spill that occurs if Enbridge does not comply with the state's request for updating that agreement.
Thank you. Any additional questions or follow-up? Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for taking the time and for joining us. I'd say that through Gabby, if you have follow-up, please let any of us know, and we'll make sure to answer any questions that may occur to you as you're putting these stories together. But we appreciate your time. We appreciate you covering this critical issue. So thank you for being with us this afternoon, and thanks to our panelists today.